All right, let's dive into a real head-scratcher, a mystery that's been bugging people for, about 2,400 years. It's all about one of the greatest thinkers in history, and a choice he made that, honestly, still echoes today. So here's the big question, the paradox at the heart of it all. Socrates, the guy who questioned everything, gets sentenced to death. But get this, his friends bribe the guards, the door's wide open, he can just walk out, and he says no. He refuses to leave. Why? Why would the world's greatest dissenter choose to die for a law he thought was totally unjust?
Okay, to even begin to wrap our heads around this, we need to meet the first Socrates, the one we think we all know. This is the Socrates from his big public trial, the one Plato writes about in the Apology. And let me tell you, he was a defiant gadfly. So what Socrates basically put forward was this radical new idea of what it means to be a citizen. He called it Socratic citizenship. And the core idea? It's that your number one duty isn't to the state or to tradition. It's to your own conscience, your own rational mind. He's saying, hey, your personal judgment of right and wrong, that comes before the law. That is a huge deal.
And this wasn't just some abstract theory for him. He actually lived it. His personal motto was kind of like a doctor's oath. First, do no harm. And to him, that meant staying out of the messy business of politics, because he didn't want to get his hands dirty with the state's injustices. He called himself the principled abstainer.
And believe me, he had the guts to back it up. We're talking about two major instances where he put his life on the line for his beliefs. First, he stood up alone against a furious mob that wanted to execute 10 generals without a proper trial. He just refused. Then, when the brutal 30 tyrants were in power, they ordered him to arrest an innocent guy. And again, he just said no. He walked away knowing they could have killed him on the spot.
So, how did he justify all this defiance? Well, he didn't see it as being selfish or rebellious for the sake of it. In his trial, he made this incredible claim. He said he was a gift to Athens, from a god, no less. He compared himself to a gadfly, one of those annoying flies, sent to sting a big, lazy horse, that's Athens, to keep it awake, to keep it moving toward virtue. I mean, can you imagine the nerve? It's an absolutely incredible defense.
Okay, so now we have a pretty clear picture, right? This is a man who puts his conscience above everything else. He's the ultimate principled dissenter. But that's not the whole story. Because the Socrates we meet in the public courtroom is not the same Socrates we meet in the darkness of his prison cell. In another of Plato's dialogues, the Credo, a totally different man shows up. And the difference is just staggering. I mean, look at this. In the Apology, he's in a public court in front of 500 jurors, and he's totally defiant, arguing that conscience is greater than law. But in the Credo, it's a private chat in a prison cell with just one friend, and his whole tone changes. He becomes this humble citizen arguing the complete opposite, that the law is greater than the individual. What is going on?
Yeah, it's a stunning reversal. When his good friend Credo shows up ready to bust him out of jail, Socrates does the last thing you'd expect. He essentially argues against his own escape. He actually personifies the laws of Athens, giving them a voice to make the most powerful case imaginable for absolute obedience to the law. And the argument the laws make is just brilliant and absolutely devastating. It comes in three parts. First, they say, hey, Socrates, if you break one law you don't like, you're basically telling everyone it's okay to pick and choose. That's how you destroy the whole legal system. That's anarchy. Second, they're like, we're your parents. We're the reason you exist. We educated you. We shaped you. To disobey us is like spitting in your parents' face. And finally, they argue, you chose to live here your whole life. You never left. That's an agreement. You made a deal, a covenant to obey our laws. All of them. So what is going on? How can the same brilliant mind make two arguments that are just completely opposed to each other? This is the big puzzle that Plato, who wrote both of these dialogues, leaves for us. Was he just contradicting himself? Or is he trying to show us something much, much deeper about what it means to be human? Well, one really powerful way to look at this is that it's not a contradiction. Maybe Plato is doing this on purpose. He's presenting us with two permanent, powerful, and totally irreconcilable moral codes. Two ways of life that are both valid, but you can't have both. And he's forcing us, the readers, to feel that tension. Think about it like this. On one hand, you've got the philosopher's code, the one from the Apology.
Here, the highest authority is your own individual reason. The main goal is protecting your personal moral integrity, your soul. That's the examined life. But on the other hand, you have the Citizens Code from the Credo. And here, the highest authority is the community's laws. The goal isn't your soul, it's public order, keeping society from falling apart. That's the political life. And here's the kicker. According to this interpretation, Plato's point is that you can't have it both ways. You can't be the perfect philosopher and the perfect citizen at the same time. Trying to combine them just weakens both. You have to choose. Where does your ultimate loyalty lie?
But hold on, because there is one last, absolutely fascinating twist to this whole thing. What if Socrates didn't actually believe that powerful argument for obedience he made in his prison cell? What if it was all for someone else's benefit?
Yeah, think about it. This is the noble lie theory. His friend Crito is freaking out, not just about Socrates dying, but about his own reputation. People would say, Crito, you are rich. Why didn't you save your friend? So maybe Socrates, in one final brilliant act of philosophy, cooked up this whole powerful argument for Crito. It wasn't to convince himself. It was just soothe his friend's guilt and give him a good reason to go on being a good citizen. Meanwhile, Socrates himself, he remains a law unto himself, right to the very end.
Okay, so this whole ancient dilemma, it's not just some dusty old story. It actually forces us to look in the mirror and ask some pretty tough questions about our own societies, right here, right now. You know, we love to think of Socrates as this hero, this martyr for free speech. But that is not how the Athenians saw him. They didn't just laugh him off as some weirdo. No, they saw him as a real, fundamental threat to their entire way of life. And in a way, they paid him the highest compliment. They took his ideas seriously. Seriously enough to kill him for them.
And that brings up a really thorny question for us today. We prize tolerance, right? But is it possible for tolerance to go too far? Could it become what you might call soft nihilism? You know, that point where we tolerate everything, not because we're virtuous, but because we've stopped believing that any one value is actually worth defending over another.
So in the end, the trial of Socrates is so much more than a story about one man's impossible choice. It's a challenge to all of us. It forces us to think about the limits of our own most cherished values. It asks us, point blank, when does tolerance stop being a virtue? And where do we draw the line?